Hey y'all, this week on the podcast we're talking with our friend Janis Putelis from the popular series MeatEater. And since it's September now and Janis and I share a similar affection for elk hunting, I couldn't help but steer the conversation that direction. We talk hunting tactics, old stories, and of course favorite recipes. Lastly, hope you're enjoying this podcast. If you are, do us a big favor, head on over to iTunes, give us a rating, and write us a review. Enjoy the show.
Yeah, when's your first hunt?
We leave out in, I think it's 3 weeks now. We'll leave on like September the 9th or 10th. Head to New Mexico. Yeah. What about you?
We're actually heading down to Louisiana a week from today to do some fishing, and maybe try to snag a nutria and a gar and some redfish, and then hang out with I guess he's a popular chef down there. His name is Justin DeVellier. I don't know if I'm saying his last name right, but yeah, and do some cooking. So we're going out to the Chandelier Islands. You ever heard of those?
Oh yeah, those are legendary.
Yeah. I've never stepped foot in the state, so I'm kind of like, we're staying in New Orleans, so I'm gonna be doing the tourist thing.
Really? Okay. Yeah. So we go actually. Jordan and Ben and myself spend a good bit of time down there, and then Troy, who works with us, he's from down there, from like south Louisiana, and area called Chalmette's where he's from, and that's actually where we still go fishing out of. But a lot of the times when we go red fishing and trout fishing, we can look and see the Chandelier Islands, but that's a pretty legendary spot for fishing for sure.
Yeah, and they say it should be good this time of year, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah, no doubt. Yeah, you get into the reds like that, man. It's hard to beat. It's pretty fun for sure.
As long as we don't get a hurricane.
Yeah, you don't want one of those. Yeah, that area, bless their heart, they're prone for them. But yeah, you don't want one of those.
Now, is this for the regular old Primos podcast?
Yep,
okay,
for sure.
So you're like the main host. You host the show and then have guests, other people from Primos join you. Yeah,
for sure. We mainly what we do is like during the season, like when we're traveling and stuff, it can get kind of a pain because I still primarily do videoing and all that kind of whatnot. So it becomes more of a struggle to work in like guests. But during the summer when we're not traveling, it's a lot easier. And then, like pre-elk season, like we'll start working like planting food plots at Cottonmouth within the next week or two. But it's still pretty easy for me to cycle people in. But yeah, we've been doing it for about a little over 2 years now. So.
Cool.
Yeah.
And congrats on finishing school, man. That's sweet.
Dude, I appreciate it, man. Look, it was like I tell everyone this story. Like I went into the Primos headquarters, never stepped foot in there before. The first time I ever met Will, and shook his hand, So I was like, oh, it's Will Primos,
Yeah,
and,
starstruck. I would be the same way. I've never shaken his hand yet either, and when I get to, hopefully one day, I'll be the same way.
Yeah, it's like someone I'd grown up as being a hero of mine, still is, But I was interviewing for the job, and he looked at me. Like in the middle of the interview, just kind of cut everything off. It was like, I'm not going to hire you if you don't promise you're going to finish your school. I was like, I will finish my school, sir.
Nice.
Oh, yeah. It's been about 5 or so years in the making, plus the time I was already on campus, but it's over now, thankfully.
Oh, that's fast, man. I'm on like the 15-year plan, so.
I heard that.
My sister-in-law just moved to town and started teaching at the university here, and so I was hitting her up last night. I was like, I wonder if you could help me out there with tuition, because I know if you're if anybody with like next to kin, I think gets free tuition since she's a professor there, So I don't know. It's a lot to take on, man, when you got a couple little kids running around the house.
I can't imagine, man. Look, I thought I had a lot to deal with. Like, I got to the point I wasn't even taking classes in the fall because fall is for sure the busiest time that we have. And I tried to take an online class, and it did not go well at all. So I was taking classes in the spring and in the summer, and it finally worked out. Like I said, it took a while, and then I thought balancing that schedule and my puppy dog was a lot to worry about. I can't imagine. You got a lot more on your plate.
But people do it all the time,
Oh yeah, it's doable. Like, I mean, if I can do it, it's doable. Because I'm not found a way to make it work.
That'd be tough for me if I had to decide if I had to do spring or fall semester, because do I want it to affect my big game hunting or affect my turkey hunting?
Oh, look, here's the funny part. One of the first spring classes I take was an ornithology class, and so we had. We had a lab assignment, right? Like Wilbur loves this story. Like we had one lab, and me and Will were going turkey hunting in Missouri, and the lab assignment, the teacher said, I want you to spend at least 2 hours outside and observe birds, and I want you to write down exactly what you saw. I was like, 3 barred owls, couple crows, 5 long-bearded turkeys, 6 hens.
Yeah, you could do that one.
I had no problem with that lab assignment. I did pretty well.
Right, you could have done it for the whole class.
Yeah. But like I said, it worked out. It worked out. Man,
Cool.
thank you for taking the time to do this, man. I know you're a busy dude.
Sure, man, no problem. Like I said, it's not quite like meeting Will Primos, but you're close, man. You're Primos superstar.
Yeah, no, man. I'm just riding the coattails.
Yeah, well, me too, man. Over here, I've been lucky to fall into where I'm at over here. Working with a lot of great talent around me that allows all of us to shine, so to speak.
Yeah, well, man. I mean, I think like I'm sure like Jordan Peterson is, right? He's been on Rogan's podcast a bunch of times. Anyhow.
Yes,
Jordan,
I do.
He said something that I really liked one time. He said, because someone was asking him about like all these, profound things that he comes up with to say. And he says, it's not like I invented these ideas. I'm just,
right.
And that's the way I feel. I'm like, it's not like, I'm just like, even the stuff that I learned before I got to Primos, a lot of that I got from watching Will Primos growing up. So I'm just
sure, man. All information is just handed down. You familiar with JJ Cale? You know who that is?
I do.
Yeah, I was watching a show. It wasn't really like a show. It was a something that NPR used to do. Is like a half interview and then half musical program, and they used to record them in Boulder, Colorado, at the Boulder Theater, I believe it was. And we went to see him there, and they asked him the same thing, like, aren't you kind of mad that like Eric Clapton took a bunch of songs that you wrote and made big hits out of them? And I think there was a couple other artists that did that too. And do you feel like they kind of stole it from you? And he's like, no, man. He's like, that's how it works with music. Like everything I know, I kind of stole and learned from other people, and it just kind of keeps moving on down the line. I'm happy to be where I'm at.
Yeah.
That's a good look at it.
That's the attitude to have about it, I think. So before, like, I got like the first question to dive into this podcast, I feel like is an important one that only you could answer if you're ready for it. Okay. So I got to know, like, how long did you train martial arts with those hiking sticks before you found yourself to be lethal against grizzly bears?
About 0.0001 seconds.
Man, how many times have you been asked about that story?
Not too often. I mean, I guess early on it was I wouldn't get asked about it, but I'd be with somebody that knew the story. And if they knew that somebody in the group or around hadn't heard it, they'd be like, hey, listen, everybody's got to sit down, and Yanni's going to tell you a story now about this grizzly bear charge, And I'd be like, all right, here it goes again. I've told it a few times. I actually re-listened to our that podcast episode the other day, just because I felt like I'd become removed a little bit from the story. And it definitely kind of chilled me a little bit to be listening to all of us sort of in that very fresh, post-charge state of mind, recounting those details, and definitely raised the hairs on the back of my neck.
Man, I one couple things. Like that's probably my favorite podcast episode that I've listened to of y'all's, and I love y'all's podcast. Your podcast is great. Every episode that comes out, it's pretty much automatically downloads, and I'm listening to it while I'm driving down the road. Y'all do a fantastic job. Well,
thank you very much. Appreciate that.
Yeah, man. But then also, like, we had an incident. Like it sounds like a like a very great overstatement to call it incident when you're talking about a bear attack. Like we were turkey hunting in New Mexico, and we had a mountain lion walk by our campsite where our tents were.
Mm-hmm.
And that sent chills down my spine. And I was like, man, what would I do if a dang bear came charging at me, like a grizzly bear? I was like, I know, like, we want to talk elk, but I had to at least ask you about that. I asked Steve too when I had him on here last year, because it's just not something you hear very often. Those.
No, it's not, and I hope to never have to experience it again. I've had 2 of them now, charging at me, and I don't need a third one. But yeah, I think it's good to sort of recount it and keep thinking about it, because it keeps you on your toes, and I think you need to be thinking through that kind of stuff. So if it does happen again, your mind, they always say if your mind's been there, then your mind and body can react in the moment. It's sort of like training. But I think it was like the purest form of fight or flight. And I think that had I had a second longer, I'm not a fighter by any means. Mm-hmm. Had I had a second longer, my brain would have gone to flight. But I think because it was upon us so fast that my brain was like, you do not have time for flight. And so pick up whatever is next to you. There could have been a rock next to me. I think I would have picked the rock up and thrown it, or whatever it was. You know what I mean? It just was like, I didn't make that decision. Like I tell everybody, like what I did there for about 2 seconds or whatever, however long that took, it was not me. It was just like this response,
just pure reaction. Yeah.
Totally.
That's crazy.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah, I can't even, because I've never even laid eyes on a grizzly. Like I've always wanted to. Like I don't want to see one that close, but I'd like to see one.
Don't you guys hunt Montana?
Yeah, I say I've hunted Montana one time.
Okay.
2, 3, at least 3 years ago, and then
are there grizz where you guys are hunting?
I don't believe so. Like I don't know enough about it, but if we never saw any, and I didn't hear any.
What mountain range are you in?
The Belt Mountains.
Oh, they have I think right now they have like the occasional kind of passerby, and they might have like a bear or 2 that sort of set up residence, but it's definitely kind of in that zone of the state where they wouldn't call it like they have a population there,
Right. Yeah. And it's, I would very much like to see one, but it just hasn't happened for me yet. But, yeah, so let's get to talking about elk, man. I mean, it's getting close to September, right? Let's get on this some fun stuff. How did you, I want to hear your story of how you even got, how you dipped your feet in the water in terms of chasing elk.
Okay, I will try to make it brief. I don't even think I had thought about hunting elk when I was growing up in Michigan. I moved to Colorado when I was 19. That's how I got onto that really long college plan. Mm. And I think like a year later, my dad was coming through, going on an elk hunt, and he was like, you know what? We could probably elk hunt right around here where you're living. I was living in Eagle County at the time, and we should maybe plan that for next year. And so sort of half-assedly, I was like 19 or 20 at the time. So hunting elk or hunting anything other than, I'm just going to say girls, chasing girls around. And that's what I was doing. I was like snowboarding a whole bunch, working, and, having a good time as a 19 and 20-year-old. Right. So like the elk thing wasn't on my mind, and no real kind of hunting was at that moment. Like within a year that was going to change. But, him saying that and me having to kind of plan out this hunt the next year got me going. And that plan, to make a long story short, I was making phone calls sort of in preparation for the hunt, just trying to figure stuff out. And I ended up talking to a guy that's like, you know what? Instead of going on public land where you guys are at, you should come rent this cabin that's on a small chunk of private that gives you access to public that doesn't get quite as much pressure. Right. So we did that hunt. That same dude ended up being an outfitter. And the next year we had a good time on the hunt. The next year he says, hey, I'm glad you guys are coming back. How about for the rest of the seasons? Colorado was broken up to like a month of archery. You got a week of muzzleloader, and you got 4 separate rifle seasons. He said, outside of the one rifle season you're coming, why don't you come up for the fall and start learning to be a guide? And I was like, great, that sounds like a good time,
Yeah.
And so what he actually meant by that is, why don't you come up and stain down a bunch of my cabins that we have up here and help me fix everything up. And you'll get into the woods a little bit and learn about elk and elk hunting, when you have some extra time, which was great. I mean, like, looking back at it, I got I wouldn't have had it any other way. It was a great experience, and
Right.
I had to work hard up there to get my foot in the door. And but I think by the end of that first year, we were overbooked, or there was a sick guide or something. And I think somewhere by like third rifle season, I sort of guided a group of guys. They didn't want to pay for like one-on-one guides or two-on-one guides. So I guided like 6 or 7 dudes and just kind of helped them, figure out where to go and sit and look and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, man, that's pretty much how I got into it. Very, very much just had a door open for me and decided to walk through it.
Yeah. It's always funny when you ask a question like that. I always like hearing those stories, because no one's path is ever like the same. It's not like there's some cut and dry way to get there. Everyone's got their own little story of how they ended up where they are. And I always think that's interesting. Yeah. So how, like, I know y'all do, you've done a fair amount of elk hunting on public land, correct?
Yes, I would say that 90% of my elk hunting has been on public land. One year I guided in Colorado on a private ranch where we hunted, 99% of the time we were on the ranch itself. But other than that, when I guided all those years in the flat tops in Colorado, we were camped and the cabin and stuff was on private, but it was a small acreage. I mean, like, somewhere in the hundreds of acres. We didn't make it to 1,000. And so every time you would walk to the back gate and you'd be on national forest,
Gotcha. Yeah. Interesting. So that's one of the questions. Like, we always get questions from like our Facebook page, our Instagram page, and all that.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times, just from being headquartered out of Mississippi, we get messages from other folks that are from either Mississippi or the Southeast, Alabama, Georgia, the Carolinas, whatever, and they've never traveled out that, they want to go elk hunting, but one, they don't know where to start, and two, they're like, the thought of stepping foot and trying to get on an elk on public land just sounds very intimidating to them. So they don't even want to try it. They automatically go, well, what's a good outfitter? They just like,
Sure.
I don't want to just, blow out on public land and not know what I'm doing. And that's not really an attitude that I encourage, because like you said, I think you could speak to, like, I'm not going to say it's easy, but I don't think people should be intimidated to try it. And I just wanted your opinion on that.
Yeah, no, not at all. I mean, I think it's definitely going to take you a little bit longer to be successful by going the DIY public land route than by going and getting an outfitted hunt. And I got nothing against outfitted hunts. I mean, like I said, I was part of it for, a good dozen years. And sometimes I recommend them because it's a great way to at least learn the basics. I mean, it's no different than taking a fishing guide out for a day. Like, what you'll learn from that guide in a day of fishing might take you all summer to figure out, right? And then after that day is over, you can hit the same water or nearby water and use all those techniques and the lures or flies or whatever it was, to your advantage. So there's something to be said for, going guided first, but it does cost a lot of money. That's like the flip side is like what it costs one guided hunt. You might be able to go elk hunt 5 years,
Yeah.
You're doing it on your own. But yeah, I think you just got to have a little bit of grit and just get after it. It's just going to take more work and more work ahead of time, right? More pre-production, doing your, scouting and just making lots of phone calls. If I was going to give anybody a tip that I think that they don't do often enough, and I'm guilty of it myself. I mean, even just getting ready for hunts that we're going to do and shoot for MeatEater, the television show, is like just making phone calls and calling local biologists and the game wardens and whoever, some kind of researcher. Maybe there's a grad student that's working on some elk project or bear project or whatever, and just hammering that research. You can get so much information, just on the internet. It's out there, I mean, I can go into all kinds of tricky stuff, but the basic stuff is, really what we all should be doing.
Yeah.
Everybody likes to talk about that trick, like going on to like a hiking forum where there's like a popular trailhead or a popular mountain that everybody likes to hike to and climb up is in that area where you're going elk hunting. Well, you can go on and read a forum and read trip reports, and there's all these hikers. They're going to be like, yeah, there's a bunch of elk bugling when I was up there September 5th, and like they're like giving away like literal spots, on just kind of because it's like a fun thing that they saw.
Right.
Nobody thinks to look in a place like that, right?
Right. Yeah.
People love sharing their wildlife experiences.
Yeah. That's interesting because, not on the hunter side. Usually that's when you get to the.
You and I aren't going to be making that post.
Did you say there's not an elk in this forest, man? I think they all left.
Oh. Yeah, we barely even saw any scat on the ground.
Funny how that works. It's funny, yeah.
It's a good adventure, I mean, I think doing the public land thing on your own, that's what you're going to be guaranteed is like a good adventure. And if that's the kind of person you are and you're seeking that out, you're like almost guaranteed a good adventure. And I think that is success that can be had. You don't have to go into it thinking that, I hope I just see one. Like if you do your homework, you should be getting into them, and then trying to figure out what it's going to take to kill one.
Yeah. Like with the resources we have now, like literally at your fingertips, like OnX, I know y'all use OnX. We use OnX with, that thing. You can get, a dang near idea of what you're stepping into before you even go out there,
Oh, yeah.
And then, as far as we on our YouTube channel that we sat down, with Will, like we took a whole week and shot instructional videos on like calling techniques, scouting techniques, all that kind of stuff. So like I said, the resources are there. And I tell people this too, because a lot of times, they ask me, because obviously I'm not against outfitted hunts either. We do it. They're like, well, I could never afford an outfitted hunt. And this, again, the public land scares me. And I'm like, man, even if you do go out there, and you don't kill an elk, I promise you're not going to regret that trip. Not like you're going to regret going out there and seeing all that and experiencing that. I think, but
yeah, by no means, man. And we all know. I mean, it's hard to in the moment. It's tough the day after an unsuccessful hunt when you got to drive back to Missouri, for a day and a half, and you didn't get one. But a month later, at Christmas dinner, you're still going to be retelling the adventures you had of that trip, whether you killed one or not.
Absolutely.
And if you're not, you ought to get out of the game.
I agree. Hunter, there's plenty of trips I've been on where I didn't kill anything and I still had a good time. I can speak firsthand about that. So going into tips and stuff, just because I'm trying to get on your delve into the insight you have from all your vast experiences, so to speak. So if you were going to go, you're approaching a piece of private land, public land, whatever, just a place that you've never hunted before.
Mm-hmm.
What is and you have, X amount of days. What is your first thing you're going to do? Out the gate to get yourself in the game.
Like this you're asking me I'm showing up and I got boots on the ground, or are we talking even before stuff you could do on the internet or using maps?
Well, let's take it from that, even before you get boots on the ground.
Yeah. Well, like I said, making phone calls to all the people that have boots on the ground and seeing what kind of information you can get out of them. And it might take 3 or 4 calls to get that one person on the line that does divulge what you're looking for. But like I said, man, that you just can't beat getting on the phone and talking to a human. Because what's written on the internet, man, I definitely take that with a grain of salt, because you just don't know. It's hard to gauge a person and gauge the information that they're sharing with you when it's written, right? And I'm sure you can find on all kinds of forums somebody talking down a unit and somebody talking up the same unit, right? So it's so it's good to talk to somebody that's at the moment, boots on the ground. But definitely scouting, looking at maps. Because once I'm there, I love to glass. I mean, that's going to be like, especially in a place you've never been, glassing from a high point and trying to find elk with your binoculars instead of your legs is key. And it can be hard to do because everybody wants to, especially when you just get there, your legs are fresh. You want to be walking around, listening for, bulls bugling and immediately getting into it. But having the restraint to just sit on a knob for a day and just, if you've found it, hopefully on a map, and you've, said, yeah, this place would allow me to see like, miles in every direction. That's like the perfect glass and knob, right? By sitting there for a full day and just glassing your tail off, like you're going to find out where all the elk are all around you, or if there are none, and you need to just like completely, you should be picking up camp and moving, 3 or 4 or 5 miles to it, and then start that process over again. But I definitely think getting up high and looking, not all elk country is made for that. There are places that are just simply too thick, too much timber, and you're gonna have to go and just hike and walk around. But if at all possible, I like to get up high and glass.
Yeah.
Depending on what I'd find out ahead of time what sort of year they're having as far as weather and moisture. Like if it's looking to be a really hot September and it's been dry, probably good to find some water sources and focus on your efforts on north facing slopes where it's going to be cooler. The animals now already, I can see it on the elk that occasionally stroll through my backyard. Their coats are not in summer mode already now. They're already changing. They're like getting blonder. They're getting a little bit thicker. So if it's a hot September, they're going to be on that north facing slope more often than not, right? They're still going to come out on south facing slopes to feed in those crepuscular periods. But, if they can find feed on the north facing sides, they're probably going to be in there. So knowing all that stuff ahead of time and having some of that stuff marked on your map, dropping some waypoints on the Onyx, finding, when you find water sources on Onyx, there's a good chance in elk country that there could be wallows, so you can sort of mark like, hey, possible wallow location here, walk up some of those smaller ephemeral stream beds, that it is that kind of, wallow habitat, right? It's not really a stream, but there's just enough water kind of trickling through there, through the woods.
Right.
Those kind of spots, man, I feel like, especially on a hot year, those can be hot spots, because there's always some like green vegetation around there that they might be eating on. Find some water if it's hot. Same thing if it's cold. It's like nowhere the big open south facing slopes are going to be. Trying to think ahead of time. What else? Yeah, phone calls and just looking at the map. But that being said, looking at the map, looking at Google Earth, whatever, it just never seems to look like what you think it's going to look like until you get there.
Yeah. That's the truth. Is that you can get a good idea, but it's not. It's different when you get your boots on the ground. I know that for a fact. I always like to ask you that question because we put a lot of emphasis on scouting beforehand. Like the place in Mexico, Primos is hunted there for the past since before I've been working there, and we still will take 1 or 2 days and scout and just try. I mean, we kind of have a pretty good idea where they're going to be, but there was one year, it was actually 2 years ago when I had my first archery tag. We got up there to there's a spot where every other year there were always elk there, always. We got up there and glass, not an elk in sight. We're like, well, that's interesting, good thing we know that. But we always, like I said, when we're talking to these people that ask us these kind of questions, I want them to have a good hunt, right? And I can't tell you how many times you hear about someone they didn't do that much pre-work, and then they just show up and they start hiking around and then blowing a bugle, hoping to hear a bugle back. And maybe that works. I just don't think that puts you in I don't think that gives you your best bet.
No, it's very inefficient. And like, I think one of the main things that people don't think about and why that works against you is that even us that live in the mountains and are, training for an elk hunt and running around and trying to hike all summer and whatever, when you go into an actual elk hunt where you're hiking mountains every single day, hills, mountains, whatever, even if it's a couple miles in and a couple miles out, those days add up very quickly. And like, I don't do that now, right? I might go for a run 2, maybe 3 days a week. Maybe I get a hike in once a week. So I'm not used to like the repetitive day after day. So when you just jump right into it and you basically burn you cool your jets, as we say, right? You like burn your legs out in the first day or two, and then you start to lose motivation. So it's good, like you guys are doing it, where if you can show up even like before season starts, and that way you're not even tempted to try to walk around with your bow and your bugle tube, and you just like you focus more on like and have like a scouting mentality of like, okay, let's just assess the situation. Let's get an idea for what the country looks like, you know? Because then you're just not wasting time, like you said, walking around the woods, blowing bugle tubes.
Yeah, which I get it, right? Especially if you watch almost any elk hunting show on TV, everyone wants. It's the same reason, kind of the same appeal. People want to go turkey hunting. They see that calling aspect of it, and that's what they want. Which I get that. That's one of my favorite parts about it. But it's that pre-work you do ahead to get yourself in the position to get to where you can experience all that fun stuff, the calling stuff.
That's right. You got to find the elk before you can call to them.
Yeah, exactly. Or put you in a situation where calling's going to hurt you, if you just don't really know what's going on, which would bring me more to, I guess, to my next topic. Like, I always find myself talking about, I like to concentrate on like common made mistakes,
Mm-hmm.
And like, how do you, like, say, I mean, you've located elk, your own elk, whatever, and you're at the point, you're going to start boots on the ground, you're going to start hunting them. How do you gauge, am I going to call at all? I'm going to call aggressively. How do you start gauging how you're going to approach how you're calling to them?
It's probably going to differ a lot depending on how intimate I am with the land and the animals on it. Where we got it in Colorado, we were pounding the same herd of elk, the same elk day after day after day, for over 2 months, right? So I'm going to treat those guys a lot differently, right? Because you don't want to, as a guide, you don't want to blow them out of the country. You need them there for the clients, right? So it's going to be a much softer approach.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to do a lot less pounding on the ground with your boots because you don't want to be spreading scent all around the woods and just sort of leaving a big imprint that that you're in there. You want to let those elk rest and be very tactful about when you approach them. But if I'm cold rolling into a spot and I've got 5 days to hunt, I'm going to be much more aggressive. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to necessarily wait for them to be calling or bugling for me to start doing that. And I think that, if I can't find them with my eyes, with my glasses, and when I say glasses, I mean binoculars.
Right.
I'm definitely going to try to use bugles and loud cow calls as a locator. Most people I think have the assumption that you can only locate with a bugle and get a bugle back. But, open reed cow calls like the hyper lip single is probably the first one. I used to do that on a lot. Carlton's estrus wine. Now I use Phelps's mini estrus call, with those ones that have the mylar reed to stick out on top of the board. Mm-hmm. You can make a loud cow call with those, and you can really like sort of, I like to say it's sort of like you can almost hear it kind of bouncing off the trees, right? Yeah. Like that sound just like really gets out there, and you'll get bulls and cows to respond to that sometimes, So I'm trying to think if there's an instance where like I'd like really would like hunt like that if I would go around really not calling. It would only be if I had found some elk and I kind of knew what they were doing and I was feeling like they weren't really being very responsive to calls, like either the bulls weren't, coming to them, maybe the rut really wasn't happening. I had a better chance to just sort of either parallel the herd and just try to slip in and get a shot, or, get ahead of them and set up in sort of an ambush.
Yeah.
I just stay completely silent. Because, doing that, I mean, like the great Chuck Adams, right? I mean,
right.
That guy, I don't know how much, but I don't think he didn't call a lot. That dude snuck around and just slipped in when the time was right. And I'm pretty sure that's how he killed most of the giants that he killed, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, it's situation dependent. But the thing is I love calling. And that's why I love turkey hunting so much, right?
Right.
Having that interaction with the animals is so much fun.
Yeah. So it's funny you should say that, because I listened to the episode y'all did last year after y'all did a public land hunting. Was it Washington, I think?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, and they were talking about your calling style or something like that. They were talking about you running around back there, snapping limbs and raking trees, and the first thing that popped into my head was like, he hunts like Wilbur hunts. That's because that's a like that.
Well, look, man, I mean, I wish I could actually like remember which truth video it was, but I think he actually might have said that it was Mary. Mary, that's Will's wife's name, right?
Correct. Yep.
I want to say that maybe Mary Primos was the one that was rolling some rocks around on a video once.
Oh,
and Will actually might have thought that there was like elk moving behind him because he had heard like, the sound of what sounds like a hoof on a log or a rock that gets kicked down the hill. Whatever she was doing, he was like, man, were there some elk that came behind us? And she's like, oh no, I just threw some rocks down the hill or whatever, So I definitely saw those guys do that way back in the day on some truth videos. But I can remember the first time that I was tipped off to an elk. We had a spot called the Burn, and it was just like I don't know, maybe a 5 or 10 acre burn on the side of this really thick hillside. It was really steep. We had a trail that went right up to it, and you would wait for the thermals to be coming down, to be slipping in there. And I was still, solid 100 yards from the actual burn where I'd be able to look at the whole thing.
Right.
Just sitting there being quiet with my hunter. And all of a sudden I hear just ka-clunk, ka-clunk, a rock rolls down the hill. I'm like, what would make a rock roll down the hill? There's not a lot of things. Like, sure, sometimes they just slip loose and roll. But sure enough, I'm like, let's slip in there right now. And, we went up a little farther and peeked in there. And, yeah, there's a 5-point bull just feeding, and he had kicked a rock loose.
Mm-hmm.
But, yeah, I do that because I think it gives, like, that extra little bit of realism. Like, the elk are always, I think, sort of doubting your calling because they're like, I can't see that cow or that bull over there that's making these sounds, right? So I feel like they're always kind of like, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
That's why I think throwing in a decoy every now and then, flashing a decoy. You've always heard of guys that'll like pick up a shed and sort of flash a shed from out behind of a tree, right? To show like there's a piece of an elk back here. But I think if you can add that next level of sound and just enrich that whole sound experience that they're getting. Like right now we have a plant called arrowleaf balsam root that's on the hillside above our house. And man, as it dries out, and it's starting to right now, it gets so loud. I mean, you can't slip through it at all. And the elk can't either. And they're not even feeding on it. They're feeding on the bunch grass around it, and they're feeding on all the shrubs around it. But when they walk through that arrowleaf balsam root, I mean, you could hear them from probably 200 or 300 yards away, just brushing these leaves, And so same thing. Like when they're over there listening to you calling, I don't know if they're thinking this, if they're like, I'm not hearing that elk walk, or I'm not hearing that elk running around. For all the bugling that bull is doing, usually I would also hear all these other sounds. I don't think that they're actually thinking through all of that. I just think that they're sort of used to hearing one set of sounds or one soundscape, however you want to put it.
Right.
And so when it's just the calling, again, I feel like they're always doubting me. And so I just like to give them every little bit of extra,
Yeah. Just trying to add that more realism to it.
Yeah, exactly. And you probably heard me say on that podcast, man, I used to, when I was guiding, I had a pair of gloves that it wouldn't be anywhere near cold enough to need gloves, but I would just don those gloves when I would be grabbing sticks and logs to rub trees or, rake the ground or whatever it might be, just because if I didn't, man, my knuckles and fingers would just be shredded. And I'd peel off layers of clothes because I felt like if I wasn't sweating, I wasn't making enough noise.
Oh, yeah. That's part, man. Like, cause again, like as soon as I heard that, cause if it sounds like the way, like if you ever like witnessed Wilbur or Miss Mary call in an elk, it sounds like exactly what you just described. The first time, the like I said, the one time I went hunting in Montana, I was filming Will, and I watched Miss Mary call in an elk for him, and she was back there taking rocks and throwing them down a hill, and she had a stick, she was raking it up against a tree, and the bull he come running into like 10 yards, and Will slam dunked him, and
Right.
Will he calls it herd excitement. Trying to create herd excitement. I've seen him sometimes he'll kind of, I wouldn't call it, I don't know if less aggressive would be the right way to say it, but he won't start out with all the limb breaking just yet, and I've seen him like start out with just calls, and then when he starts to cracking limbs or throwing rocks, that'll be what makes the elk break and come. I've seen that happen probably in the double digits of him or Brad calling in elk. It's a very, very, very lethal tactic, I would think, to add into your calling.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And like I said, man, I feel like if you're not sweating, you're not doing it enough. I mean, I was actually watching elk this morning. I feel very fortunate that every now and then, we have like a herd that sort of like moves through this valley that I live in.
Right.
And they literally happened to be in my yard, probably 10 of them. And then there was another 30 or 40 that were kind of across the gully on a hillside. So I yanked the kids out of bed and we got to watch them. And funny enough, there was actually in the middle of all these elk, there's like probably the biggest bear I've seen yet on the property, smack dab in the middle of them, peeling serviceberry bushes over on their sides, just chowing away. And there's elk within 5 and 10 yards. And the cows are like yakking, like doing that really loud, just
Yeah.
like trying to like get everybody together and move them up the hill. And like the young bulls doing some bugling, and like they're 5 and 10 yards from this giant black bear, and neither the bear or the elk care about each other, like
Just
at
not
all.
worried about it.
At all. It's like the craziest thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm watching them, and it's like 90% of that herd is feeding, and then there's like the young bull. He like chases the cow a little bit, and when he does that, you hear crash, 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 right? And then the cow kind of goes back to feeding. He stands there, he bugles. And then all of a sudden there's like 2 calves up the hill and they start chasing each other. So you hear crash, 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 crash. When they stop, it's pretty quiet, right? For 5 minutes. It's like no sounds at all. It's just quiet, a cow chirp here and there. And then all of a sudden that young bull is like, it's whatever. It's getting to be late August. So he's getting fired up. So he like starts pushing towards another cow. She runs off. Crash, crash, crash. So, besides just swinging branches and rolling rocks, like I try to get that crash, crash, crash going, like I'll find like a set of bushes. I'm like, yeah, if I run through those, I'm hopefully going to get crash, crash, crash. And that sound of like a cow running away from a bull, or maybe he's running after her, whatever it might be. But, yeah. And the only way you're going to do that is by watching elk a bunch and trying to then replicate, what you're seeing.
Exactly. I was actually talking to Jay Scott the other day, and we were talking about that, just about how, I mean, there's so much that you can learn from this, but from these kind of things, podcasts, YouTube videos, whatever, but going out there and seeing it and hearing it for yourself, that's what made me get better at calling and doing it, just seeing it happen and listening to it with my own eyes and my own ears. That, it seemed kind of, it's the same way with turkey hunting. You go out there and you hear actual turkeys, you learn how to call to them better. It's just a natural progression, I guess.
Definitely. But, yeah, I want to finish it off with, I'm definitely with Will with like start soft, quiet, not aggressive, and then just sort of escalate to whatever level is needed. But definitely start with as little as possible, right? You never know. That might be all it takes.
Yeah. That's usually, like I said, Wilbur is not at all afraid to get aggressive. That's evident in all his videos, but he usually he builds up to that. Sometimes he just kind of throw. I've seen him before, if he'll just throw a challenge bugle, and I've seen it work for him, but typically he kind of builds to it.
And a lot of that might depend on how much time is left, I mean, if it's, you only have 30 minutes before dark, and it's like the second to last day, like then get after it, right?
Yeah. The one instance I was thinking of when I said that, we were actually hunting, and Troy was the only one with the tag left, and it was our like last full day that we had, and we've been hearing some elk, and we got the spot we wanted to call, and Will just right off the bat threw a challenge bugle at them, and then the circus show began. It was like what did y'all also, I keep referring back to that podcast, there's a term y'all used, a rut ball. And yeah, I was like, yeah, I understand. When y'all started explaining what that was, I was like, yeah, I've experienced that before. I know what they're talking about. It's pretty incredible.
It is, man. It is. You just hope for that, right? Like one of those every year kind of makes me happy to just kind of get in the middle of. I think you guys have called it maybe, or what was his name? Was it Jim Horn that used to do some Primos videos, and he called it like the magic circle, maybe?
Yep.
Yeah. And yeah, man, I'm all about being in the middle of that magic circle.
It's something. It happened to us last year, and it was something about like I was filming Will. Well, all of us were there. I just happened to be running primary camera, and Will shoots this elk, and then he kind of runs off, and we all just kind of sat there and gathered ourselves. But while we were sitting there, I mean, when you get in one of those magic circles, you're kind of just picking them off the outskirts, and there's so much madness and elk rut craziness going on. They don't really, a bull running off doesn't really phase them. And so we're sitting there, hadn't gone and looked for Will's bull yet. In the middle, we're just hearing all this bugles and cows and sticks breaking and them just doing their elk thing. It's absolutely incredible. The kind of stuff that just, when you go to sleep, you hear it in the back of your head. It doesn't leave you.
Yeah.
Yeah, one of the, I guess the last topic that we could end it on is something fun. Like, what are your plans for this September? The Primos surround view blinds have truly changed the game for ground blind hunting, and now for the month of September, you can get the lowest price ever available only on Primos.com. Receive $50 off 360 and 270 surround views. Head on over to the website now and check it out.
Yeah, I wish I had like an exciting personal plan for September to tell you about. I don't, because two reasons. One, we have a really busy September with shooting MeatEater, and then two, I drew a Wyoming Region G mule deer tag, which we're going to head down at the end of September, and that goes the first week of September. We'll be hunting, and then October. It goes. The hunt is the first week of October. And then right on the heels of that, I've got a first rifle tag in Colorado for elk. So there's a chance I'll get some, bugling there. I think the hunt starts on like the 12th-ish of October, which in Colorado, they can be talking pretty good still then.
Absolutely.
So those are kind of like my two big hunts. I'm very excited about both of them, burn some points, getting both of those, and, looking forward to those. But September, we're doing, it's going to be a great hunt. I just won't be hunting myself, but Steve and a guy, Rourke Denver, who we've hunted with in the past, they both drew muzzleloader tags in a unit, kind of like on the New Mexico-Colorado border. And so we'll be down there mid-September, and usually by that time in Colorado, just about everybody's, wanting to start bugling a little bit. So, I'm excited to see that, man. That's one thing I miss I used to live in Colorado for 15 years and living in Montana now. Colorado has those aspen groves that are magical places to, hang out and hunt in. And I know that where we're going, we're going to have lots of that. And so just knowing that I'm going to get some, breezy afternoon naps in those aspen groves, that's going to be pretty sweet,
Yeah. I can remember the first time I saw an elk slipping through an aspen grove. I thought my heart was going to stop. I know what you're talking about. It's a special thing.
It really is. So, man, that's kind of the main, kind of elk action activity we have in September is that muzzleloader hunt. And then we'll take a week off and we'll be going mule deer hunting in Wyoming. So a little bit light on the rut action for me this year, but I can't complain. I'm just going to make sure that in 2020 I've got plans for like my personal backcountry hunt, which I usually like to do every year, is to take like a solid week and going to the mountains and spend 6 or 7 days, chasing bulls.
Right.
But yeah, won't be happening this year. But like I said, I've got great hunts on the horizon. So
yeah, it won't be lack for other fun things to do. Y'all be plenty busy.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
So,
No, it's gonna be nuts.
So one more thing, and we'll be done. I'll let you go. But in the nature of MeatEater, who you're with, I thought I'd be doing our listeners a disservice if I didn't ask you some sort of wild game related question, right? So,
Okay.
Since we're talking about elk, I'm not, I'm sure if someone told me to say like their one favorite thing, that'd be hard for me to peg down. But like just summer, like you have some elk meat. What are some, I don't know, 2, maybe 3 of your favorite things that you like to do with it?
I would say this is gonna sound like a cheap answer, but we, especially with the 2 little kids now, I've got 6 and 8-year-old girls at home, and we go through a lot of ground.
Right.
I got I'm not shy about saying that we eat a lot of ground elk meat. I mean, it's good, it's healthy, it's delicious, and we do tacos and burgers and chili, all kinds of stuff. For like roasts and steaks, probably the most common way I'll cook it is either, and I'll go both ways. I'll either sear and finish in the oven, or I'll do like what they call like a reverse sear, where you can do like the sous vide thing or put it in a smoker and do it low and slow and bring up your roast to temperature and then just sear it at the end. But I much prefer to take like a whole chunk, like a whole top round or whole chunk of loin, and cook the thing to 125 degrees, pull it off, let it rest a little bit, then slice it into, however you want to slice it. If it seems to be like the elk is a little bit chewier than most, I'll slice it thin to win. Mm-hmm. But you can also have that same roast and cut like, nice, 3/4 inch kind of slabs off of it, and it's a completely different eating experience. But I feel like that's the best way to kind of keep most of the little moisture that's actually in elk meat, right? Because there's not a lot of fat.
Right, it's lean.
And so I feel like keeping that chunk whole, then slicing it after you've cooked it versus cutting steaks and cooking those on the grill. We eat that a lot, very simple. Sometimes I'll make a little, quick like Hunter's pan sauce where, kind of use the drippings, throw some mushrooms in there, and make a little thickener of like roux, and then, use some stock, maybe a little red wine to make kind of a sauce gravy, for that same meat.
For sure.
And then, man, probably like the next favorite thing that I like to do a lot is working with all my what I used to consider like the worst cuts and the tough cuts that used to kind of linger in the freezer a long time. Right. Now they seem to kind of go first. And it started off with me. This probably started off with me meeting Steve, and he turned me on to doing ossobuco with the elk shanks, which is when you take the shank from like below what you would think is like the knee joint, going down towards the ankle joint. And out of an elk, usually you just get 2 or 3 like prime ossobuco cuts, because you got to cut them like you go with the bone in there and you cut it 3 inches, maybe 2 to 3 inches thick, and get sort of these like meat rounds of shank that have the shank bone in the middle of them, right?
Right.
You take that, and the quick version of the recipe is that you take it, a little bit of flour, brown it, and then it goes into a covered Dutch oven that'll go into your oven with tomatoes, celery, onions, sort of kind of it's an Italian dish, so think Italian spices.
Right.
And you just let it low and slow. You just let it simmer in there for some can be done in 3 hours. I've probably cooked them sometimes as long as 5 or 6 hours. And man, all that stuff that you don't like about a shank, all that stuff melts away, that sinew and that, all that connective tissue in there. And when it melts away, it adds this like just amazing, like silky texture to, the meat and the sauce and everything. And I'll serve that over polenta or risotto, and my favorite dish is right there. But then that's, like I said, that was kind of the first thing I did with what people think of as like tough, shitty chunks of elk a lot of times. Right. But any thing like the neck roast, same thing. It's got a lot of that connective tissue, right? You're not going to roast that thing whole and then cut thin slices out of it and serve it. That's not going to be good. Right. But searing it and then putting it in that Dutch oven or a crock pot low and slow for 5-6 hours and then picking it apart. Again, all that connective tissue then adds that kind of silkiness and that flavor, and it gives you what people want out of meat most of the times when they say like, oh, I love a juicy steak, right? Well, it's that juiciness that everybody loves, and it's hard to come by with wild game because you just have the fat content. Well, that connective tissue and collagen and all that stuff in there, that's what gives you that, juiciness from wild game. So I'll take that neck roast and pick it and then do like tacos with that meat, or I'll do like a pulled kind of barbecue sandwich. We'll just take that meat, put it on a bun, throw some barbecue sauce on there and eat it that way. So yeah. Is that a good answer for you?
Yeah, man. I knew I could count on you for that stuff. Heck yeah. Yeah, see, if I wouldn't ask you that question, look what I'd have missed out on. I'm gonna try some of that. I'm gonna try some of that this elk season, Lord willing. What's that I can't. What? How do you pronounce that? The Italian one?
Ossobuco.
Ossobuco.
Yeah.
I'm gonna do that.
Ossobucco. I think there's 2 C's at the end. Ossobuco. I believe that Ossobuco means like hole in the bone or hole in the meat or something like that. Because when you look at that disc, you can see that the bone kind of has that hole in there, that has the marrow. Right. I'm sure that marrow that's in that bone also adds a lot of flavor to it.
Oh, but yeah. No doubt.
It's actually one that it sounds difficult. There is a fair amount of prep that is involved to it, but once you get everything into that pot, you really can't mess it up. The only way you can mess it up is if you crank the oven to 350 and then just like boiled it, right?
Right, yeah.
Adding too much heat will also dry it out, and it's not going to like just start to fall apart like you want. I mean, it's really no different than doing a pig overnight, right? On a smoker, right? Like it takes all night, man, and you just got to apply that slow heat to it. But yeah, once you get it in there and get it going, like you can't mess it up. And once it's tender, you've got like a space of hours before you're sort of going to get beyond a good product, right? You can leave it in there and let it cook. As long as you check on it and all the moisture hasn't evaporated, you can, add in a little stock every now and then, but you've got a long window of it being good before you're going to break into it being something bad again,
Right.
But I would try it, man. If you've never done the ossobuco, that would be like my number one thing to say. Yeah, make sure because I noticed you guys pack out your shanks because I saw a picture of you guys with elk legs sticking out of your quarters, which the truck must have not been too far away because I always chop those lower legs off if I'm going to be packing them more than a couple 100 yards. So you guys must have been close to the truck. But if you're packing out bone in quarters, like that's the perfect opportunity. Here's a hot tip for you. If you like hot tips and you're like, well, how am I going to get those chunks of ossobuco? These dudes from Alaska we hunted elk with last year rolled in, and they all hunt moose, and so they know how to break down some big critters, right?
Right.
They had Stanley smooth cut saws with them, every one of them. And man, I'm telling you, I've never seen a saw go through bones like these Stanley smooth cuts. And the great thing about it was that it was light. That saw was like, I don't know, a quarter of a pound. It's like a light little wood handle. The blade's only maybe a foot long. And as soon as I came out of that hunt, I went down to Ace Hardware and got me a Stanley smooth cut. I actually got to use it the other day because I picked up my first ever roadkill. Little side story here if you got another minute.
Yeah.
I'm rolling home. My neighbor stops me and he's like, you want a moose? And that kind of caught me off guard. I'm like, a what? You know? Like, well, my daughter just saw one of the calves. We had like a mama with twins running around the neighborhood valley there. And she's like, yeah, you know, my daughter just saw one of them get hit. It was like 10 minutes ago. We just moved it off the side of the, you know, off to into the ditch. And I take that back. One time I did it with an elk, and a buddy took the elk, but it had been smashed on the interstate by like a big truck. I think by like an actual dump truck. Right. And that thing, we peeled it out, and the whole thing was just purple mush. I mean, there was nothing fit for human consumption.
Right.
A little bit leery. But we rolled up on it, and it looked like, I mean, the truck that had hit it was still there waiting on the cops. I mean, and the truck had almost no damage to it. So I'm thinking, well, it couldn't have been that bad. And you had like a little bit of blood come out of an ear and then one broken back leg. And I'm like, well, it's probably worth it. You know, like it's worth it to give it a shot instead of just, you know, giving it to the coyotes immediately. And when else am I ever going to get to eat a calf moose, right?
Right.
Like,
yeah.
that doesn't happen. So we packed it out, and I was as I was butchering it, I was using that Stanley smooth cut saw, man, and I'm telling you, that is a Asabuco making machine right there.
Yeah, hot tip for the day. I like that, man. Yeah, so what you were talking about, we killed the elk that morning, and we were actually able to finagle the Polaris Ranger through the rocks. We had about, I think it was a little bit over a mile we had to pack out, so not very far. I've done much further than that, where those legs probably would have went if we had to go much further. But it was pretty much just side hilling the whole way. There wasn't didn't have to go back up over any hill, so it wasn't terrible. But man, that Asabuco.
We've all done enough elk pack outs that when you get an easy one, you take it.
Oh my gosh, yes, absolutely, yeah. Yeah, we didn't. I wasn't complaining about that at all. I was like, side hilling for a mile? I got that. Come on. We can do this, guys. And that was the last hunt of the year, too, so we were all pretty wore down. We were very thankful for that quick pack out job, for sure. No doubt. Well, man, look, I'll let you go. We broke our hour.
It's all good, man. It was fun. I appreciate you inviting me to have me on.
Man, absolutely. Look, I'm such a fan of MeatEater. I love what you guys do. I love the show. I love the podcast. That the Das Boat thing y'all are doing on YouTube. I've watched both episodes. That's been great. Y'all do a good job, man. Y'all really do. And I know that you're busy. So thank you for the insight. I learned some. Hopefully our listeners learned some. And I think we're done, man. Thank you for coming on.
Yeah, man. Well, good luck to you in September and to all your listeners as well.
Cool, man. Well, that's going to be it. We're going to wrap up. Thank y'all for listening to the Speak the Language podcast.